Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have just a really complicated stack of sources and research, and we're going to distill it all down for you.
We are, and we're heading straight into the crisis unfolding in West Africa.
Specifically in Burkina Faso.
Exactly. Our mission today is to really get to the heart of this paradox in the Sahel. On one side, you have this government that's running on some incredibly powerful anti-colonial pan-African rhetoric.
Right.
And on the other, you have a country that has, by the numbers, become the single most dangerous place for terrorism in the entire world.
It's an incredible contradiction. And at the center of it is this young military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He's fighting what is essentially a war on three fronts.
At least three.
He's trying to thwart assassination plots that are allegedly linked to the guy he overthrew. He's battling these relentless jihadist groups. And at the same time, he's warning all of Africa about this coming Black Winter.
All while completely rewriting his country's alliances in real time. It is a high-stakes geopolitical chess match.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it threatens to set the whole region on fire. Okay, let's just jump right in and unpack this, starting with the most immediate threat to his government's survival. So our sources really kick off with this crisis from January 3rd, 2026, a foiled coup attempt.
Yes.
And this is so critical because it shows the threat isn't just from outside jihadists, it's coming from inside the military itself.
Deep internal divisions. And the Burkinabe officials, they were very specific about what this was.
What was the objective?
They called it a decapitation strike.
Wow.
Yeah, this wasn't just some mutiny. It was a planned tactical operation scheduled for late around 11:00 p.m. And the goal was simple. Kill Captain Traoré.
Kill him where? At his residence.
At his residence in Ouagadougou. The plan was either close-range fire or explosives. I mean, this suggests a profound level of insider coordination.
Absolutely. This wasn't just, let's go seize the national radio station.
Not at all. The plot was designed for total paralysis of the state. So beyond killing Traoré and neutralizing other senior leaders, there was another critical objective.
Which was?
Attacking the country's drone launch facilities.
Ah, okay. That's the backbone of their counterinsurgency strategy.
It is. If you destroy the drones, you cripple the regime's ability to respond to anything. It would have given the plotters time to consolidate power before any loyalist forces could even figure out what was happening.
And the government, they immediately pointed the finger. They talked about an exile connection.
They did. They named LT's calm Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba.
He's the former transitional president, the one Traoré overthrew back in 2022.
The very same. He's currently in exile in Togo, and the government claims he was the primary architect, coordinating the whole thing from outside the country.
Which is a very convenient narrative for the current regime.
Of course. It allows them to frame any internal dissent as being manipulated from the outside.
And they also claim there was money involved from a regional neighbor.
Yes, the Minister of Security, Mahamadou Sanataina, he went on record. He claimed about 70 million CFA francs were funneled through Ivorian channels to fund it.
70 million CFA francs. Now that sounds like a massive number, but what does that translate to?
Well, it's roughly 115,000 US dollars.
Okay, so it's a significant sum, but it's not a state-level budget for a coup.
Exactly. It's enough to pay off a small group of operatives, maybe buy some light arms, but it's not an overwhelming war chest. Still, the accusation itself, just naming Ivory Coast, instantly ratcheted up the regional tension.
And in response, we saw this almost immediate mobilization. Traoré's supporters, the Waynians.
Yes, they literally came out into the street.
They formed a human shield, didn't they? Around key government buildings overnight. It shows that his grassroots support is very, very real.
It absolutely is. The Waynians demonstrate that Traoré has built this popular base. They see him as a revolutionary figure, not just another military strongman.
But here we have to look at this whole narrative pretty carefully.
We do. Because while the Burkinabe government confirmed the plot and the arrests, there was this notable silence from major international news outlets in the immediate aftermath.
Right. The BBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera, none of them were really picking it up at first.
And our sources point out that this raises some big questions about the actual scale of the threat.
Yeah.
You have to remember, there's a documented history of information warfare in Burkina Faso. We saw deepfakes and exaggerated coup claims popping up online back in 2025.
So the government has a vested interest in controlling the story.
A significant interest in controlling the narrative around internal resistance.
And that idea of narrative control is so important here, because while the regime is fighting these immediate internal threats, Traoré is also fighting a war of ideas. He's using this powerful rhetoric to legitimize everything he's doing.
It's an ideology built on Pan-Africanism, strategic sovereignty, and what he calls the decolonization of mentalities.
He's really channeling the ghost of Thomas Sankara, isn't he?
He is explicitly positioning himself as the heir to Sankara's anti-imperialist struggle. And the core message is always dignity over fear.
His response to the threats against his life has been, for his base at least, incredibly effective. He basically dares his enemies to try and kill him.
He does. He had that famous line after one of the threats. He said, "If you think that killing me will stop this movement, you are wrong.
Yeah.
What I represent is an idea, and ideas do not die with bullets."
That's powerful stuff.
It is. This is a leader who gets that an ideology built on self-sacrifice is much harder to kill than one built on just fear or military power. He's almost courting martyrdom, which makes him much harder to overthrow.
And this ideology, it puts him on a collision course with the West, especially France. His response to President Macron back in January 2025, that was one of the sharpest diplomatic clashes we've seen in a while.
Oh, it was blistering.
Yeah.
Macron had made some comments about African ingratitude for France's military presence since 2013.
Essentially saying, you should be thanking us.
Right. And Traoré's response called that an insult to all Africans. He completely flipped the script, saying, "It is thanks to our ancestors that there is France. He should pray to Africans every morning."
I mean, that's a line designed to echo across the entire continent.
And he didn't stop there. He framed all foreign cooperation as a kind of modern exploitation.
Slavery with a new name, I think was the phrase he used.
That was it. He also claimed that France is just changing its strategy. He said after they pull their military out, they just use private security companies and military advisors.
The most dangerous ones, he called them.
Yes, to protect corporate interests without the political baggage of having official troops on the ground.
But he widened the net beyond France. He directly implicated the U.S. in the security crisis, too.
And that's a key piece of his worldview. Traoré accused the United States of instrumentalizing terrorist groups to maintain instability.
The argument being what? That these groups are deliberately kept active.
Yes, to keep the whole region in a state of permanent war, to block any real economic development, and justify the continued plundering of natural resources.
Which brings us to his most terrifying warning. This concept he calls the Black Winter.
The Black Winter is his. It's his apocalyptic metaphor for what's coming to West Africa.
A bloody, murderous chaos.
Stoked, he says, by imperialists who are trying to set the entire region ablaze. He frames it as the ultimate choice for Africa. You either unite now against imperialism, or you face endless slaughter until you don't even exist as sovereign nations anymore.
It's shock therapy, rhetorically speaking.
It's designed to shock the population into full-throated acceptance of his revolutionary agenda.
So if the rhetoric is the hammer, the geopolitical shifts are the nails being hammered in. The break with traditional Western partners has been incredibly fast and systematic.
Total. The break with France was a complete severing of ties.
What did that look like on the ground?
They kicked out the French ambassador, they tore up all the bilateral defense agreements, and they forced every last French soldier out of the country.
And critically, those French forces relied on U.S. support.
Heavily. U.S. logistical and intelligence support. So when the French left, the entire Western security footprint got smaller by default.
They also turned their back on the main regional body, AES. That's a huge move.
It's the defining regional move. Burkina Faso, along with Mali and Niger, they formed their own bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES.
That was September 2023.
Correct. And this new alliance is explicitly defined by military cooperation and its anti-Western stance. And that led to them all formally withdrawing from AES in early 2025.
They called AES a puppet for French interests.
Right, did. And that one move just fractured the entire West African security and economic structure that had been in place for decades.
So with the French and Americans pushed out, who fills that vacuum? Traoré has called Russia a strategic ally.
The pivot to Russia has been dramatic. Since late 2023, Russia has become their #1 external security partner. They're providing arms, training, security personnel.
Primarily through the Africa Corps, which is basically the successor to the Wagner Group.
It includes many Wagner veterans, yes. And it's not just boots on the ground. Russia reopened its embassy in Ouagadougou.
Which had been closed for how long?
32 years. And to seal the deal, Traoré has been very public in his support for Russia's military operation in Ukraine.
But the pivot isn't just to Russia. China is also stepping up, specifically on the hardware side.
That's right. Burkina Faso had already reestablished ties with Beijing in 2018, but by 2024 they'd upgraded it to a strategic partnership.
And that means more arms sales.
It does. We've seen reports of a delivery of over 100 armored vehicles. So it seems like Russia is handling the frontline security presence, and China is becoming the go-to for large-scale military hardware.
And let's not forget, the immediate result of all this is more friction in the region, especially with Ivory Coast, which we already saw pop up in that coup plot.
The tension with Ivory Coast is extremely high. Traoré has personally accused them of welcoming all the destabilizers.
And when the Ivorian government refused to extradite the alleged plotters, that just confirmed the standoff.
Exactly. And you can see this tension playing out on the border, with incidents like Ivorian police officers getting arrested after crossing into Burkinabe territory. This regional split is making any coordinated fight against terrorism much, much harder.
Right. So we've covered the ideology, the high-stakes diplomacy, but let's talk about the reality on the ground. For the average person, how is this revolutionary government actually doing against the real threats?
The hard truth is that the security situation is, well, it's catastrophic.
Catastrophic.
Despite all the talk of sovereignty and resilience, Burkina Faso is now ranked #1 on the 2024 Global Terrorism Index.
#1 in the world?
In the world. That is a monumental shift. It means Burkina Faso is now the global epicenter of terrorism. It accounts for more than half of all terrorist casualties worldwide.
That is just a staggering number. And what does that look like in terms of control? These aren't just isolated attacks.
No, not at all. We're talking about vast territorial control. Jihadist groups, mostly JNAM.
That's the group for the support of Islam and Muslims.
Correct. Them and various AES Alliance factions, they control an estimated 30 to 40% of the entire country. And these aren't just thugs. They're sophisticated operators. They exploit local ethnic tensions to recruit and consolidate their power.
Which means the humanitarian cost must be, just immense.
It is overwhelming. The conflict has created one of the world's worst displacement crises. Over 2 million people are internally displaced as of early 2025.
2 million people.
Just try to imagine the strain of having 2 million of your citizens forced to flee their homes. These areas are also facing acute food insecurity. You basically have huge pockets of the country that are completely ungoverned, where the state just doesn't exist.
And the government's response has been to say that elections are not a priority. Security has to come first. So how is the regime handling governance and dissent in the middle of all this?
The Junta just extended its own rule for 5 more years back in May 2024. They made it clear democracy comes second to revolutionary security.
And how they manage dissent has been pretty brutal.
Very. We have documented evidence of unlawful conscription. They are literally forcing critics, journalists, judges, activists into the military and sending them to the front lines as punishment.
A way to silence opposition by putting them in harm's way.
Exactly. And on the economic front, they're trying to assert what they call economic sovereignty over their gold mines.
Which is their biggest source of revenue.
By far. The junta has moved very aggressively to increase state control over the gold sector. They've raised taxes, they've nationalized some mines, all to make sure that money goes to the state, not foreign companies.
But that move has attracted a lot of international scrutiny.
It has. The U.S. government publicly accused the junta of using that gold money primarily for its own survival, to fund its new partnerships, not for actual national development.
An accusation the government in Ouagadougou rejected, of course.
Vehemently rejected.
Let's just tie this back for a second to the information warfare we mentioned earlier. That information environment must be critical for the regime, especially with a low national literacy rate.
It is a critical insight. The national literacy rate in Burkina Faso was low, around 34.9%. And that fact makes the population acutely susceptible to state-enforced propaganda.
So when state media pumps out content.
Right. When state-run TV and their social media networks are pushing out content, including some very effective deepfakes and manipulated videos, it creates a kind of alternate reality.
An alternate reality where the revolution is succeeding.
Exactly. The government projects an image of stability and constant success in the fight against insurgents. And for a population that doesn't have access to independent media to fact-check those claims, it's very easy to accept. It helps sustain popular support despite these massive security failures.
It really paints a picture of a nation caught between this charismatic ideological vision and a terrifying reality on the ground.
Precisely. And that's a very volatile foundation to build a new government on.
So after all this, what does this deep dive really teach us?
I think the main takeaway is that what's happening in Burkina Faso is the ultimate contest between a revolutionary idea and hard, practical reality. The fact that the January 2026 plot was foiled, that shows the regime has resilience and real popularity, but the underlying threats, the jihadism, the humanitarian crisis, they are not going away.
So for you, the listener, what this deep dive shows is that African leadership isn't just pushing back against Western influence anymore. They're actively reframing their own deep internal security problems as being direct tools of neocolonialism.
Right.
But the real test, the big question, is whether all this powerful rhetoric can actually defeat groups like giản, or feed millions of displaced people, or establish a lasting government that actually controls its own resources for its own people.
And that leads to the final provocative thought here. Traoré himself said that if they have to go through a black winter to be free and united, then so be it. But the core question for the entire Sahel remains. Will creating this alliance of Sahel states and pivoting to Russia and China actually allow these nations to stabilize themselves? Or will the internal wars in these new partnerships just create a different, maybe even more insidious form of dependency?
So you, the listener, have to track which cost turns out to be higher in the years to come. Freedom from the West or dependency on the East.